I want to welcome everybody. Apologize for the technical difficulties that we're having. The team are aware of those issues and they are attempting to address them as they arise. We had our opening prayer. It was before the special item. We had our opening prayer. It was before the special item. So we're ready to begin. Yesterday, we spoke about the subject of inclusivity or inclusive writing. And I said that it was related to the ongoing topic that I'd been discussing for a long time now. Connected with that subject is the subject of the Sabbath. And I received a question. Someone asked, when Christ will come at the second advent or the second time, will the weekly Sabbath come to an end? So I'm not sure why the person is asking that question. Either they are unaware of what inspiration teaches, or they think that there has been some change, I guess, in my thinking. So I want to quote from Desire of Ages. In English, it's page 283, paragraph 2. Desire of Ages, 283.2. The Sabbath was not for Israel merely. It was for the whole world. Like the other precepts of the Ten Commandments, it is of imperishable obligation. Of that law which the fourth commandment forms a part, Christ declares the following. And now she's going to quote Matthew 5:18. Till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law. That basically means that there'll be no change in the law. He then comments on this verse. So long as the heavens and the earth endure, It's page 283, paragraph 2. So long as the heavens and the earth endure, the Sabbath will continue as a sign of God's creative power. And when Eden shall bloom again, on the new earth, God's holy rest day will be honored. He then goes on to quote from Isaiah chapter 66, verse 23. And various prophets use that verse differently. There are varying understandings of how to understand what chapter 66 from the book of Isaiah actually means. But in this context, she's clear. She says, from one Sabbath to another, then she uses her own words. The people of the glorified new earth shall worship the Lord. So Ellen White's clear that the weekly Sabbath will endure through eternity. So I'm not sure why the questioner is asking that question. Because that's a standard Adventist understanding. And I'm not aware of any change in thinking on that subject within the movement. So connected to that question, another one was asked. When we go to heaven, will we stop being humans? Because we become fully God's counterpart. So I don't know how each of you view that question. Now, this is not so straightforward. I want to quote from some selected portions through the Spirit of Prophecy. And there are many passages that you could find depending upon your search criteria. This is taken from Desire of Ages, page 23. Paragraph 1. Nearly 2,000 years ago, a mysterious voice was heard in heaven. The voice was heard coming from the throne of God. saying the following: Lo, or behold, I come. God, you do not require a sacrifice or an offering, but you have prepared a body for me. Behold, I come, as it is written of me in the Old Testament. And the purpose for my coming is to do your will. So, of course, that's a quote from Hebrews chapter 10, verses 5 to 7. So these words are a fulfillment of a hidden purpose. Christ was about to visit the world and become incarnate. She then goes on to say that a body was prepared so that the glory which Jesus had in heaven would be hidden. And the last part of the paragraph, it says, his glory was shrouded, his divinity was veiled, and it was veiled with humanity. And this is the important bit. The invisible glory in the visible human form. So this idea about Christ's human form, the word form, has troubled Christians for millennia. And I think that's what lies behind the questioner's question, the person's question. This age-old question: what does Christ's human form mean? Is it substantively different to our human form? The reason why I asked this question, the reason why I chose to respond to this question openly, was because I believe it's connected to the subject of inclusivity. Okay, I'm going to read now from the book Evangelism, which, as you know, is a compilation. Give me one moment. So here, Ellen White develops this thought. It speaks, the subtitle is Erroneous Teachings. I'm going to cut into the verse, and I'm going to use we're going to paraphrase what she says. God and Jesus each have a personality. Christ declared, I and God are one. Yet it was Jesus who came to the world in human form. And now she's going to explain why. Laying aside his royal robe and kingly crown, I gave the reference, it's on the Zoom forum, it's Evangelism, page 613. It's taken from Testimonies for the Church, volume 9, page 68. It's the original source. Laying aside his royal robe and kingly crown, Jesus clothed his divinity with humanity. And now it's going to give another reason why. That humanity, you and I, through Christ's infinite sacrifice, so that sacrifice is both his death as a human being, as well as the sacrifice of becoming human. Through this sacrifice, we, humanity, might become partakers of the divine nature and escape the corruption that is in the world through lust. So here she gives another explanation. Not the first one that we read, that we might be destroyed by Christ's divinity. But now the reason given is that we might partake of divinity. And in order for that to happen, the Christ had to give an example that that divinity had to be hidden in humanity. Or as it says in the passage, clothed. Or a phrase that Ellen White may use in another place, the house in which we live. Now, A.T. Jones has developed this theology along with Wagner, and their argument can be summarized in the following short statement. Not a question about the divinity. It's about the reality of the humanity that Christ took upon himself. Whether it was real and whether it was the same humanity that we possess. And I've done many studies on this in the past. So if we understand the purpose of Christ's second advent, that a real God became a real person so that real people such as ourselves might also partake or have possession of the divine nature, then the following must be true. Christ's divinity and humanity were true and genuine. And therefore, our humanity and our divinity must also be of the same nature. And in the book Steps to Christ, page 14, I'm actually reading from the book Heaven, page 73, which is a devotional. I'm assuming we will understand how to interrogate the spirit of prophecy and the difference between original sources and compilations. So the subtitle here is "One with the Race He Has Redeemed." God loved the world, so much so that Jesus was given to us. Not only to live amongst us, not only to die for us, Christ was given to us. Christ was to identify himself with the interests and needs of humanity. He who was one with God chose to identify himself with us, becoming one with us. And this connection that Christ has with us, this link, this tie, is never to be broken. Jesus is not ashamed to call us his family. Hebrews 2:11. He is our sacrifice, our advocate, our sibling. Sibling is a non-gendered term for your brother or sister. Bearing our human form. The term human form is the same one Ellen White used in the earlier reference I gave. Jesus was a real God and a real human. Just as we are and will be true humans, partakers of the divine nature. So Jesus will bear this human form, our human form, before God's throne. That is between the first and second advent. And then going forward after the second advent, and through eternal ages, one with the race he has redeemed. A child of humanity. And then she says the reason for all of this. And all this was done so that humanity might be lifted from the ruin and degradation of sin. That humanity might reflect the love of God and share the joy of holiness. Now, the reason I chose to quote from the book Heaven and not the original source because what the editors have done is they have taken various statements from the Spirit of Prophecy and they've put them together in this chapter. And I don't think it's a coincidence that it's chapter 8. Because we all know what the first day is. The 8th day. And also a symbol of resurrection. The title of the chapter is Face to Face at Last. So the reason why I think this is an important question, because it deals with various aspects in the second reference, which was Evangelism 613. Ellen White used the phrase at the end of the passage, escape the corruption that is in the world. Give me one moment. So she's quoting from 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 4. We have exceeding great and precious promises. The translators can actually quote the Bible verse if they would like. It's 2 Peter 1, 4. I'll give you an opportunity to find it and read it to your members. It's through fulfilling these promises that we become partakers of divine nature. That word partaker means someone who shares. In the King James. So these promises allow us to share the divine nature that God possesses. The question that you have to ask yourself is if that is real divinity or a fake divinity. And I think each of us needs to understand that concept for ourselves. Because once that is only part of the promise. Because the other part of the promise is that having partaken or shared in this divine nature, and each of us needs to be clear when that happens, either here in this mortal body or in eternity in our immortal bodies. The second part of the verse says, having escaped the corruption this corruption that is in the world, and it has come into the world through lust. So that word lust means desire or having a longing for something, that I want something. But it has a negative connotation to it. I have a desire for something that is ostensibly forbidden. And what is it forbidden by? Or whom? Who or what forbids this forbidden desire, this lust? So I want to try something now. A bit of logistics. I want to ask somebody the answer to my question. So we're going to see if this works. If it doesn't, then I'll answer the question and we'll move on. So I hope none of you mind me asking you without notice. So if I could ask Magda to answer my question. And before she answers it, she can repeat what my question is. So I think the coordinator needs to make some adjustment to her audio setting before she can speak.
Yes.
So Magda, if you can tell me what the question is and tell me what your answer is.
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Okay, I'll ask someone. I'll ask someone to repeat my question, then Magda can attempt to answer it. Emma, what's the question?
You said that the word loss has negative connotations, and that implies that it's a desire for something forbidden. And then you asked, who or what is it forbidden by?
So my question is, it's related to the word lust, and the implication is that this lust is a desire that's forbidden. My question is, who or what forbids this? How do we understand that?
It's forbidden by God.
So Magda says that it was forbidden by God. And I hope we all know that, yes, that's the right answer. But I think there's a depth to the question that goes a little bit beyond the fact that God forbids it or God doesn't like it. So there are these desires that are forbidden within us. And I want to suggest that this verse teaches that the promise that is given to us is that we can exchange these forbidden desires for something else. And we can exchange those forbidden desires with divinity. Or as Peter says, the divine nature. So it's only by accepting divinity that we can escape. It's only by accepting divinity that we can escape. Now, it should escape the attention of none of us. That the language that's being used here is either borrowed or it's the same as the language used by another prophet. Natalie, where else do we hear that term, escape? So it's in the Bible, a book or a chapter or a prophet. Okay, so I have a few people here and Natalie isn't sure. So I can see there's a group and I have Dickens in that group. Oh, one moment, Natalie.
Daniel.
Okay, so Natalie, so Natalie says Daniel chapter 11. And that's what the three members who are the two members who are with Dickens have said, yes, that's the answer they were going to give. So as soon as you get to Daniel 11, we all know the verse. (41). There are people that are going to escape out of his hand. Now we know that that escaping happened under the midnight cry, or what we term the loud cry. So what I want us to understand is that in the history of the loud cry or the midnight cry, depending on what term you want to use, there is an exchange happening. Slavery for freedom. And because we know that, we know that there is also an exchange of freedom for slavery. We've taught this for many years. And I still hold that this understanding is true and correct. But what I want to point out is that Peter uses the same model when he speaks about escaping. So now, this person in Peter, who is going to escape, the corruption that's in the world, the corruption that's within the person, and that corruption occurred through having forbidden desires. And we could equally say having escaped the corruption brought about by his hand. I hope we can all see that. in 41, and we could all guessed it's 41 because we're in 2 Peter 1:4. If you like playing with numbers. It's not the loud cry that creates this change. It's these great promises. And what's happening is an exchange from forbidden desires, which are within us and all around us in the world, in his hand, under his control, but the lusts are within us. They are forbidden desires. The desires are within us. What terminology do we use today that explains this phenomena? Taken straight out of 4:1:1:4. Any thoughts, anyone? So to save time, I'll ask one of my fellow travelers who are with me. Emma, how do we describe that? What phraseology or terminology do we use to explain that today, in today's language?
The desire within us.
Go ahead.
Are you asking what language we use to explain that desire within us? Okay.
The framework that we've got is the world, because it's his hand, and our desire, something that we possess. So it's us and the world. Okay.
Are we labeling it sexism? Is that?
So they're not sure.
I don't have a question. I don't get.
And they don't understand the question. So we've got verse 41 and chapter 1, verse 4. And we have got the individual, and we've got the world. And I don't want the reality to escape our attention that this is his hand. So I want to suggest that this model is found directly in 2 Peter 1:4. And the way we speak about it today the language that we use is the personal is political. I hope we can see that. that there's an individual experience that is connected to what's happening in society, in the world. And I think that's important for us to understand. Because I've spoken about individuals in the movement, mostly men, who have a problem that they are individually being mistreated. Marginalized or disenfranchised. And part of my response to that, not the part that tries to address their allegation, is for them and the rest of everyone else to understand that this is not a personal issue. Only. It's a political issue. And I want us to remember, when we use the word political in this context, you can't confine yourself to the concept of literal politics. It has to have a wider context. And you may disagree. You have the liberty to. But in the past, I've also described this as a prophetic phenomena. So we have a promise. At the loud cry, there's an offer for an exchange to happen through a promise that was given by God. And I believe that was Matthew 5:18. No, not 5:18. Hebrews 10, chapter 5. Sorry, Hebrews 10:5. This promise was facilitated or created because a body was prepared by God for Jesus. So once that body has been provided, the promise can be implemented. Now, we read this in the context of verse 41, the midnight cry, the loud cry. But this promise has and will continue to be fulfilled through history. and it was fulfilled before the body was given, and after the body was killed. Because it's a promise. And there is an exchange that happens. The exchange is surrendering forbidden desires for divinity. And that is not merely a personal experience. Because both verses teach that it's a phenomena that is worldwide or spans humanity. So it becomes vital for us to understand Christ's humanity and divinity because it explains our own. Now, this divinity or the lust, whichever paradigm you live in, whichever worldview you not only hold to, but that you experience, you have to ask yourself a question. Are you free? Or are you constrained? Does his hand control you? Are you a prisoner of his hand or of him? When we say him or his, it's verse 41 language. If we say the political or the world, it's verse 4 language. So I hope we can see that. So most of us think that we're free moral agents. To think as we deem best. And when I say think, I want to connect that with our behavior and our actions. We spoke about these yesterday when we dealt with the subject of inclusivity. So if you're a slave or a prisoner, and both verses teach that you are, because it speaks about escaping. Then the implications are that you're not free to make your own choice. even though you may think that you are. I haven't watched the movie, but it sounds to me like the Matrix. We're living in a world where we have the semblance of autonomy and freedom, but he controls us. And it's done in such a way that we're not even aware of it. And the only time you realize you're in conflict excuse my ignorance, that happens when you take one of the tablets. I don't know if it's the red one or the blue one. You can tell me. It all becomes a living reality once you partake of the divine nature. And I think it's important for us to see that. So I ask that you pray for me as we close, so I can hold on to that thought, develop it into our next study. Let's close with prayer. Dear Lord, I want to thank you for your goodness and your watch care. Sometimes we ask questions, the answer to which we don't truly understand the implications of. When I first read this question, it seemed so simple, so straightforward. But as we unpeel the layers, and look at some of the depths, it seems to me that you want to teach us something. Something beyond the union of the human and the divine. Something about our present experience. However much we understand or don't understand, I hope that each of us both desires and has an experience of partaking of this promise to exchange our lusts for divinity through your strength. Amen.